What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're going to look at 6 things that we've learned during pre-season, such as who are the best bench options, who's had a really solid pre-season, what transfers and manager quotes might make us rethink which players to pick for our Game Week 1 squads, and stuff like that. So if you find it useful and you enjoy the video, please do give it a like, and obviously hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content right up until the Game Week 1 deadline, and then all throughout the season as well. We're trying to hit 300,000, which we're not too far away from. So please do hit the subscribe button and make sure you support the channel. Before we jump into the video, I did want to talk about today's sponsor, which is Fantasy Football Scout. If you haven't already checked them out, you can become a member by clicking the link in the description below. And if you want to become a premium member, you can sign up yearly or monthly and basically make use of all the great tools they've got. So a really customizable and useful season ticker, comparison tools, rate my team tool, member videos. The list kind of goes on, right? Hall of Fame, custom stats tables. There's a load of stuff in there. The one I'm going to look at today is the player projections. So if I just click on projections here, I usually look at a 4 to 6 game week period. So they've got 6 game week projections here for different positions. So I'm going to look at midfielders, for example, and you can come down the list and see who they're projecting to score the most points over the first 6 game weeks, which can be useful if you're stuck between a couple of players to look at. So for example, right, you've got Kulusevski, Foden, Mount and Saka. They're all very close, and if you're unsure, you can use this as a tool to kind of differentiate between the one you should look to pick. Obviously, you've got to put a little bit of context behind it. So Kulusevski, interestingly, is above Saka and Mason Mount. So if you're sure about his minutes, you could go with that. If you're not, you could kind of mentally take those points down a little bit. But one thing I really like is stuff like this. So Martinelli is on 24.5 points for the first 6 game weeks. So he is behind Saka. And I think we can all agree that Saka is a better option than Martinelli. But when you factor in the price, if you want to save 2 million to spend elsewhere, then it might just be worth sacrificing that Saka spot and putting Martinelli in instead. But obviously you can use this however you want for any positions you want as well. So there's a ton of player projections in there, same for forwards, same for defenders, etc., and all those other tools I mentioned before. So if you want to sign up and become a premium member, link in the description below. Okay, let's see what we've learned about the Spurs wingbacks, because there have been some new quotes from Conte on Perisic and Doherty, which might be useful in determining whether to go for one or none for our kind of Game Week 1 squads. So this is what he said kind of more on Perisic. He's an important player because he's really good. That's helpful. You want really good players. He moves forward, good in 1 versus 1s, and then he can use both feet. He was before a winger, which is why he's good in those 1 versus 1 situations. He has to continue to work because at this moment, he's not the Ivan Perisic I know. That's not quite a good thing, right? That's not what we want to be hearing. But then he goes on to say, that is normal though, but I'm happy because he's reduced the time to recover from his injury. So that sounds like they expected him to be out a little bit longer, so he's perhaps ahead of schedule. What's really interesting is not the last game against Roma, the one before that, he got 30 minutes. And in the final pre-season game, which often features the first 11 for the first game in Game Week 1, not always, some players might change, and obviously they'll use the rest of the training sessions this week to determine it, but quite often that team is the one that then starts the first game of the season. And Perisic got over 70 minutes in that game. And if there was any real concerns over his fitness, you think they would have brought him off a little bit earlier, just so that they didn't like put him through too much. I think the fact that he got past 70 minutes was a pretty good test for the next game. But again, I will say I'm looking for reasons to put him in, so maybe I'm slightly biased, okay? We'll go on to the next bit of the quotes. It was the same for Matthew, for Doherty. I hope to see him like last season. I think it's positive that he's kind of remembering how good he was last year, because he could be absolute gold for 5 million. Now he's working and he's struggling. We need to have patience. We need to give time for these players to be really fit. Now, he hasn't said anywhere that they're not fit enough, but I think it's clear that they're not at the level he expects. Now, what is the way to gain fitness? To play matches, right? That's why players go through pre-season. Now, they could do that from the bench, but there is the possibility that they just do it from the start and he maybe subs them off early. Obviously, not ideal if that's before the 60-minute mark. But if they get subbed off a few times early on, around 65 minutes, not really a problem for us, because hopefully they've got the clean sheet locked in. It will be very important for us. I think from this, by the way, I think it's pretty clear that Doherty and Perisic are his first choice wing backs. I don't know, any Spurs fans, let me know in the comments if you disagree, but that's what I'm kind of hearing from this. At least when they're all fit. I'm not saying necessarily from Game Week 1. But then we have Sessegnon. That is a guarantee, and I think he's a guarantee in terms of that he is fit. He's had a lot of minutes pre-season. He can be used. Also, Emerson is good, so he's again saying he's got another good player. There is the new player Spence. Sounds like he doesn't really know too much about him. He is a guy who has to work a lot because to go into Tottenham, it's different in the Premier League, right? So for me, he's saying Jed Spence is not really an option right away. There was no real mention of Lucas Moura here possibly playing wing back. I think it sounds like to me the top two had Doherty, get the name right, Doherty and Emerson, and Perisic and Sessegnon. And I think when everyone's fit, Doherty and Perisic will be the first choice wing backs as long as they continue to play well when they are getting those starts. So in terms of what we've learned, Conte's got a lot of options at wing-back, but we kind of already knew that. I think the fact that Doherty and Perisic played the last pre-season game is a good indicator that they've got a chance of starting that game week 1 team or that game week 1 fixture. Let's wait and see what Conte says in his final pre-season press conference ahead of that Southampton game. But if we don't hear any more concerns over fitness, I think they'll start. They might not make 90 minutes, they might only make 60 to 70, but that would be a good way for them to build up fitness. So I think overall this was pretty positive. We know they're not at the same fitness levels as some of the other players, but I think they might be in a position to start that Southampton game. Let me know in the comments below, are you going to go for one of them? So I was going to do a separate video on the best bench options, but I think we can just cover what we've learned in this one. So in terms of 4.5 million midfielders, I think Andreas Pereira is clearly right now the best option. Not expecting him to be like the next Mo Salah or anything like that, but he should pick up some fairly advanced positions in the final third, on some set pieces as well, a little bit of goal threat, a little bit of assist threat, and ultimately any other 4.5 you look at is probably either not going to be as attacking or they're just not going to get enough minutes. There was some talk about maybe De Silva at Brentford being an option. He's had quite a few minutes during pre-season, but he didn't start the final pre-season game. So there are some question marks over his minutes. He might emerge as a good option at some point. But I think from game week 1, if you've got a £4.5 million midfielder spot, don't fight it. Just put Andreas Pereira in. It's not a spot that you're going to get loads of points from anyway. You might as well just go ahead and pick the option that everyone else is going to go for. In defence, it's probably Nico Williams is the best option. Should be fairly nailed on. Playing in a wing-back spot for Nottingham Forest. So we'll be getting forward. Still remains to be seen how many attack and returns he's going to get. And obviously, we're not expecting many clean sheets from Nottingham Forest. But as a playing player at 4 million, he probably is the best option. Second best is probably Patterson. The reason that, I mean, Patterson's obviously playing for Everton, so straight away you would expect them to have a better chance of getting clean sheets. But I think there's more question marks over his minutes than there are for Nico Williams. The reason for that is, although Patterson's got a lot of pre-season minutes, Coleman's been injured, and once he's back fit, which may or may not be for game week 1, whenever that is early on, Patterson might get taken back out of the team. It's possible that he starts well, Lampard goes with him and he keeps him in the team, but there's just more question marks there. So again, I probably just wouldn't take that risk for a £4 million spot, and I'd probably just put Nico Williams in. I do want to talk about Leon Bailey, because I have gone kind of a little bit back and forth with him. At one point, I started quite liking him. I had him in a draft as a bit of a rotation option. Then I took him out. The reason for that was I wasn't quite sure about his minutes, and there's a lot of options at Villa. He could quite quickly get taken out of the team, then you're stuck with a £5 million option. But actually, when I've been looking at 5 at the back drafts, I kind of like the idea of having him in, playing him for Bournemouth, possibly playing him for Everton. If he does well, because he's so cheap, a lot of people will jump on. His price could go up as well. And ultimately, if you're playing a 5 at the back formation, it's no harm having some players that are going to get minutes. So would I get him over Andreas Pereira if I only had one cheap midfield spot? Possibly not. I'd probably just save the 0.5. But if I'm going 5-2-3 or 5-3-2, something like that, then I think Andreas Pereira and spending the extra 0.5 over one of the other 4.5s to get Leon Bailey could be a good option. He did start in the final pre-season game. He did get a goal as well. I think he's pretty likely to start the Bournemouth game. He's probably not going to get you to 80 to 90 minutes that often. There is a chance at rotation. He's not a completely risk-free pick, but he's only 5 million. And as we're going to see later on, Bournemouth are a pretty good team to target. So Leon Bailey could be an option. I don't think I'd spend the extra over Andreas Pereira, but if I needed 2 of them, I think he'd probably be in. So there's lots of teams and players that have had a solid pre-season, right? I'm not just talking about wins and goals, but we're looking at fitness levels, how many minutes they've had individually, how many minutes they've had on a team level to build understanding and chemistry with each other. Like Zaha, for example, keeps getting goals and assists in pre-season, looking good. I do think we're right to completely ignore Crystal Palace defenders and attackers, because ultimately the opening 4 fixtures are just not good enough. But maybe at some point during the early stages of the season, we will be looking at them. The likes of Martial, Rashford and Sancho, for anyone that wants to punt on a Man United player, they've had a lot of minutes together. Spurs are another one who probably should have their own section in here, because outside of like Perisic and Doherty, who we've already talked about, Kane and Son and Kulusevski and Richarlison have played a lot of minutes together. They're getting that fitness level up to what Conte expects. And I think when he came in last year, Spurs improved both from a defensive point of view and an attacking one. And then in some ways I'm a little bit scared about what they might do, especially early on, because they have played a lot together. There's been no issues there. And Spurs have had a lot of their new signings early on. So right now in my draft, I've only got 1. I feel like I should probably have more, but it's just that old saying, you know, how many can you fit in? You can't have everyone. But Spurs, solid pre-season. And Arsenal in particular, again, I know Zinchenko didn't necessarily join up until a little bit later, but Jesus in particular has been in there pretty much from day one. Lot of minutes together with Saka and Martinelli. And I think Arsenal was a team we saw improve last year and is probably going to happen again. We've talked about them a bit, but coupled with those early fixtures, Palace, Leicester, Bournemouth and Fulham, I think they're looking good. Now, Palace in particular is not necessarily an easy fixture, but I think Arsenal's attack is going to go one step above where it was last year with Jesus. So although Crystal Palace will not be an easy game, I do think Arsenal can get a goal or 2 in that one. And if you've got 1 or 2 attackers, that looks pretty good. Leicester, I'm really unsure about. I've talked about this a lot. Their expected goals conceded last year was awful, right? One of the worst teams in the league. They did have a lot of injuries, but right now they're being linked with Schmeichel leaving, Fofana possibly leaving, even Maddison, who I know is not necessarily a defensive player. There's talk about him maybe going to Newcastle, possibly to force a new contract, I don't know. But they're not really bringing anyone in. I am a little bit worried that they might be as poor as they were last year, and some of these players might start to force moves. Like Fofana to Chelsea, that's a pretty big upgrade for him. So that Leicester fixture at home, the first home game of the season for Arsenal, I think that actually on paper probably, or it probably is a little bit better than it does look on paper. And then you get Bournemouth and Fulham. So I think Arsenal players look great. A bit like Spurs, I just think we shouldn't take a huge amount from pre-season, but we can take little bits. And the fact that Jesus has been in from day one, we know that him, Saka and Martinelli are probably going to be the front 3. I think it can only be a good thing that they've worked so much together going into game week 1. So we've got another longish quote to go through, but I think it's quite important, and it does show that Bournemouth might be in a little bit of trouble. Now, I know that sounds fairly obvious, because from an FPL point of view, whenever newly promoted sides come up, we always target them. We know that Bournemouth, Fulham and Nottingham Forest are likely to concede goals, but this doesn't sound great for Bournemouth at all. And their opening 4 fixtures are especially important for FPL, because first up is Aston Villa. So I've just talked about Leon Bailey possibly being an option. Second game is against Man City away. Lots of people thinking, and I include myself in this, possibly going without Haaland, without any other Man City attacker. Game week 3 is Arsenal. So if you don't want to, if you haven't got Kane or Son for Wolves, you don't want to captain Haaland versus Newcastle, you don't want to captain Salah versus Man United, then possibly Jesus or Saka or Martinelli or someone like that could be a captain in game week 3. And then game week 4, for everyone thinking about not going for Salah, well, Salah's got Bournemouth at home, right? And that could be a mammoth score. So this is what Scott Parker's been saying. We're 6 days out from the start of the Premier League season, and we're way short of where we need to be, right? So not good already. That's just the cold, hard facts. We barely have any defenders, right? Get your attackers in playing against Bournemouth. We've lost 8 players at the start of the season. At this present moment in time, this squad is much weaker than it was 2 months ago when we got promoted. So they've been promoted, 2 months has gone, and they're weaker now than they were before. That's not a good sign when you want to start a season in a new league that is already very difficult to do well in. Of course, no disrespect to what we've got, although you can't imagine that the other players that are going to have to play are liking this quote very much, but I didn't anticipate to be where we are this close to the start of the season. Goes on to say, I wouldn't want to return to a back 4, so he has been playing a back 3. My experiences tell me that that'll be pretty tough, but it may have to be an option. I'm not sure we will be able to defend defend well enough in a 4. So if you see them line up with a back 4 and Scott Parker's not really confident in it, there should be, and again, I know it sounds obvious because it's Bournemouth, but this just sounds even worse than what we might have been expecting. There should be goals for any teams that play against them. Of course, I think we look a bit vulnerable anyway, but next year in this league, the one thing we're going to have to be is rock solid. We're not going to be a team that can go and score 3 or 4 goals, so we're going to have to try and keep the door shut. So it does sound like he's going to go out and try and just defend as well as possible, not concede too many, try and get something on the counter, just try and nick a goal. But ultimately, yeah, these quotes, I wanted to talk about them because they're missing a lot of defenders. The manager's already saying before a ball has been kicked that they're in a really bad position. They're weaker than they were 2 months ago. And given those fixtures, the kind of Aston Villa, Man City, Arsenal, and then Liverpool in game week 4, that should make us think about how we pick our teams. So if you're on the fence about having like one of those players from those teams, these quotes might make me think differently about that. And Leon Bailey in particular, I know I'm getting a bit excited. He's one of those players that's getting hyped up a few days before the season. But I think he could do decent things against Bournemouth in game week 1, especially if they're struggling that much. So talking of injuries, I did want to mention Jota because I think he has a bit of an impact in terms of who's going to get good minutes in that Liverpool front line. And Klopp was asked about him. He said, Diogo was not here with us. How could he play a football game? That will take a while, unfortunately. Now, it's hard to know exactly what a while is, but it doesn't sound good. There is another press conference before game week 1, so hopefully Klopp will get specifically questioned on that. We'll have to wait and see. But because he can play on the left, him not being there is good for Diaz. Because he can play in that number 9 position, him not being there is also good for Darwin Núñez. Obviously, with the number 9 position in particular, there is still the threat of Firmino, which isn't ideal. I don't necessarily think because Firmino started against Man City that he definitely starts against Fulham, because that is a difficult game and they do play a bit differently with Firmino, who's in there for a bit more pressing, control and stuff like that. And ultimately Darwin Núñez did come on and did impress and did really well, so he might have done enough to get a start against Fulham. It's just, in my eyes at least, and I am a little bit of a more risk-adverse manager, is he then going to start game week 2? Is he also going to start game week 3 and game week 4? I just can't imagine that Firmino sits on the bench for that long, and that's what worries me. The thing with Darwin is, if he plays, he's going to do really well. Like one of the advantages is he plays for Liverpool. He's going to get a lot of chances and a lot of opportunities to score goals. The disadvantage is there's a lot of other good FPL picks for Liverpool, and I don't know if we need to go all in from game week 1 with £9 million spent up front on a player we can't 100% be sure if he's going to start. Whereas Diaz for £1 million less, I think we can be a bit more assured about his minutes because there's less competition on that left-hand side. Núñez has played off the left before, but I feel like for Liverpool, he is mostly going to play through the centre. And obviously then you've got Robertson as well. So personally, I'm probably going out without Darwin Núñez. If you're a more manager that likes a bit of risk, a bit of excitement, he could still be a good option. On Diaz in particular, I've started to see people say that his output's not great, he doesn't have much goal threat, they think he's going to be a bit of a letdown in terms of output. But I'm looking on FBref, he scored, 4 goals, 3 assists, so 7 returns and 11 starts for Liverpool. The previous season, when he was playing for Porto, 18 returns and 18 starts. 11 returns and 16 starts before that. He can do it. I wouldn't put too much emphasis on what happened in that Man City game. Obviously, they are a tough team to play against, even though Darwin Núñez didn't make it seem like that. So I think Jota being out is something that affects both players in a positive way. For me, I think £9 million on a player I still can't be sure is going to start that takes up an important Liverpool spot is just not something for me. I still think Diaz is a great option. Whether he's better than Saka or Mason Mount, I still think it's very close. And if you can get Robertson instead, maybe go for one of the other two. But don't be put off that he didn't necessarily look or do amazing things against Man City. He's got easier fixtures to come, especially in the opening 4. So one thing we've learned is that Cucurella could still move. Now this transfer hasn't happened yet, but it is something that could move fast. The deal with Man City seems to be off. They don't want to pay the transfer fee that Brighton are asking for. But Fabrizio Romano is saying that Chelsea are confident on reaching an agreement with Cucurella. Not expected to be an issue. Contract proposals are being prepared. Negotiations ongoing with Brighton. Price tag is £50 million. Chelsea want to be fast and they might include one of their players as part of the conversation, right? Going the other way. Now this is important for a few reasons. One, we might get a Chelsea defender for just 5 million. That could be a good option. The main problem is I don't know if he's definitely going to come in and play left wing back when Chilwell is fit. Now, there are probably still some question marks over how fit Chilwell is to start the season, but he has had some pre-season minutes. So I think Cucurella might be coming in as a left centre-back, where he has played for Brighton before. Not necessarily his best position. He is a very good attacking full-back or wing-back, but that could be where Tuchel uses him unless he gets any other centre-backs in. So we could see Reece James on the right, then Koulibaly, Thiago Silva, Cucurella left centre-back. A bit like how, you know, Kyle Walker for England's been used as a right centre-back. Tuchel's even used James there before. Luke Shaw's been used as a left centre-back before. And then Chilwell on the left, right? And obviously, if Chilwell's not fit enough or gets injured at any point, they've also got a very good backup for that left wing-back spot. And they are apparently in talks for other centre-backs as well. So there could be some rotation. So potentially we get a Chelsea defender for 5 million. Potentially we get a Chelsea wing-back for 5 million if Chilwell gets injured at some point. My other hopeful knock-on effect, and this is a little bit of speculation now, is they were looking to bring Dumfries in, and maybe they still will. Maybe they'll go for both these players, Cucurella and Dumfries, and that might just provide competition or backup for Reece James. But until I saw that Cucurella was linked, I was worried that Dumfries was going to come in and James might get pushed to right centre-back. So I think this is potentially a good transfer for Reece James. I think unless a right wing-back is signed before the Game Week 1 deadline, Reece James is going to play in that position rather than in a right centre-back position, which is a good thing, right? That is where his talents lie, being that attacking wing-back, not having to sit back in a back three. So yeah, in terms of what we learned, I guess nothing official until the transfer is done. But there is possibly a £5 million defender, probably not for our Game Week 1 squads, but possibly soon after that. And I think this could be a good thing for Reece James. Let me know in the comments below, especially if you're a Chelsea fan. Do you think Cucurella is coming in to provide just competition for Chilwell and backup, or do you think he could play left centre-back? So I know I said 6 things that we learned in pre-season, but as I got to the end of recording this video, after already getting the thumbnail sorted and stuff like that, I noticed this tweet from Jordan Blackwell about possibly playing £4 million goalkeeper, which is obviously quite big for our squads because playing £4 million keepers are hard to come by. So this is about Leicester and Ward. He said Rodgers backs Ward and Everson to fight it out for the #1 shirt, with Schmeichel's situation to be resolved this week. So it looks like Kasper Schmeichel is leaving the club, right? I think he's been playing there for like 10 or 11 years. Sounds like Ward has the edge at the moment. Leicester will only dip into the market for a third choice keeper. So they're not looking to replace Schmeichel. They already think they have the #1 keeper at the club, Ward or Everson. Now, interestingly in FPL, Schmeichel was priced at 5 million. Ward came in at 4. Everson hasn't been priced. And I'm guaranteeing, well, I'm pretty much 99% guaranteeing you, Everson will now come in at 4.5. Had he been priced before, they might have priced him at 4 million dead on, but now I think they'll put him in as 4.5. Went on to say a quote from Rodgers: Ward is an exceptional keeper. I've always said we've got a #1 keeper there. We saw him against Watford, how he comes for crosses, how he takes the ball. He can deal with the ball at his feet. I've got every confidence in him to go in and do a great job. I have seen a lot of people saying that he could be injured for Game Week 1 and not guaranteed to start. So hopefully Rodgers gets or asked about that in the final press conference before Game Week 1. But if Everson comes in at 4.5, there's almost no reason not to just put Ward in at 4 million and hope for the best. The only thing that can backfire when you do that is if you suddenly want 3 other playing Leicester players and you're locked out of doing that. I just don't see how that happens. So for me, Ward will now be my £4 million keeper. And if he does play and he is the #1 and he is fit at the start, he's useful on the bench if I need him. If my goalkeeper gets injured, I've got someone on the bench to play. And if he doesn't ever end up playing, it just doesn't matter. I might get a few price rises out of him and happy days. So according to this, it does look like Ward could be the #1 keeper. We'll have to see if he's ready to start Game Week 1. But ultimately, you don't really lose out anything by putting him in unless another £4 million keeper emerges before Friday's deadline. There we go. Hopefully that was useful. Let me know in the comments below if you've got any thoughts on what we've talked about. Will Ward be in your team? What do you think about Cucurella going to Chelsea? Let me know in the comments below. If you did enjoy that video and found it useful, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you are new around here as well. And I'll catch you tomorrow for another video.